Today we're looking at Proverbs 27. It's an interesting one. Again, we're dealing with perspective. And again, we're taking this from a kingly point of view, not just your everyday person. Again, it's very important that kings make right decisions. And you're like, well, duh, let me write that down. But yeah, it's important that a king not surrounded by fools, that he understands what wisdom is, that he understands discernment, not just in the spiritual ooh kind of ooky I got a feeling, but to look at to look at patterns, to look at charts, to look at ways things are moving, to understand people's psychology and the sociology of people, to understand how going to react. Many of the strategies, the battle strategies that God had for David and for Joshua were actually working with socialization, knowing that they would chase you, knowing they would leave everything behind, knowing if the Midianites saw blood, they would move in thinking, oh, they killed one another. And instead, remember the story where God had made water in a place with Elijah and some of the kings. The king of Israel and the king of Judah were out with Elijah, and he made water happen in a place there was no water and no rain, and the enemies thought it was blood, and that they turned on one another, and instead it was just the opposite. We see where God has that, and he has these insights that we can learn. We can get into his brain, not just, again, we kind of traffic a little bit into some spooky ooky, I have a feeling someone in this room has a headache or something. When the power is in the patterns, the power is in the grid. And here we are, boast not yourself of tomorrow, for thou knowest not what a day may bring forth. You can't say tomorrow's going to be a good day, or if I'm going to do this and I'll go here and this is what we're going to do. There's no saying that all plans, go out the window after the first shot is fired. You make the best plans you can given a situation, but again, there's a lot of little things that go into play. Let another man praise you, and not your own mouth, a stranger, and not your own lips. Again, lifting yourself up in pride. Wrath is cruel, and anger is outrageous, but who is able to stand before envy? I mean, think about that. Envy, you're envying somebody. I want what you've got. That was the basic sin, in the garden was, I want what you've got, or I want what I'm told you have. I want this. You've got more than me. That was the sin of Eve. That's what Satan was telling Eve in the garden was, Adam has more than you. He has a God likeness, or God has more than you. He has a God likeness. You don't have this. She could have said, I don't need it. I just need to be in his presence. I don't need to be, like him, and I'll never be like him. He's God. I'm a created person. So we said open rebuke is better than secret love. The idea that I'll openly, reproof you, openly call you down. I remember the time when Paul called down Peter because he was showing favoritism to the Jews. We see that as a good thing, but even today, oh, don't judge me, don't judge me, don't judge me. Open rebuke, I'm not talking about starting a fight over something small, but if it is a sin or if it is a wrongness, I love it if somebody tells me you've got the wrong wrench, or that's going to be the wrong part, or you're going the wrong way, turn around, those are points of thank you, you've helped me. Faithful are the wounds of a friend, but the kisses of an enemy are deceitful. Again, the wounds of a friend, the idea if two men are sparring and he hits you with a sword or he hits you with the cane, he's teaching you something. You're not protecting yourself, or you're not in strong footing. The kisses of a friend. That's even right there, that bitterness of what happened between Jesus and Judas. Because Jesus did love Judas. Just because he knew that Judas would betray him doesn't mean he didn't deeply love the man. A prudent man foresees the evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. This is one of my favorite ones. We saw this in different wordings. A prudent man sees evil and hides himself. You're going to get back. Let evil do what it's going to do. But the simple, those that aren't paying attention, will go out and be punished. There's so many in here. A continual dropping in a very rainy day, and a contentious woman are alike. Again, here's a man who understood contentious women, even with kings. Even with kings, have to be careful of contention. Not just with, of course, there are men that will be contentious, but also with women. Sometimes we lower our guards around the women in our lives, even moms, even sisters, even daughters, not just wives, and we can let contentiousness come in. This doesn't say contentious wife, it's contentious woman. Iron sharp as iron, so a man is sharpened by the countenance of his friend. There's a bunch of these here that I want to go through, but I don't want to spend all my time. 27 has just got a lot of strong nuggets here. You know, be thou diligent to know the state of your flocks and look well at your herds. Keep an eye on your stuff. Know what's going on. Be a good steward. And again, these simplistic understandings work well for shepherds and they work well for kings. And that's what we're seeing in 25 through 29 is how to think like a king. If you want to know how to think like a king, look at 25 through 29. Moving to, we are at the very end of First Chronicles, and like First and Second Samuel, they break off with the changing of the guard. First Samuel stops with the coming on. Let me double check and make sure I'm saying that right, because First Samuel ends with Jonathan, but you have also you have a place in here where it might have been in Kings, so I misspoken, but where you have the end of David's life and the next book starts with Solomon. Here's what we have here in Chronicles. You have where you have the end of David's life in First Chronicles. Second Chronicles picks up with Solomon. Let me look for a second. I wonder if that's Kings. Just take a second. Nope, Kings doesn't do it. But anyway, okay. Maybe I'm wrong about that one. I'm going to pass on that. That just hit my head. But I think it's interesting. We do have a break here in the book. You have this break of Kings. And you'll have that, okay, at 1st and 2nd Samuel, the break of Kings is at Saul. At 1st and 2nd Kings, the break is at Ahab. So here we have the break is at David. So, okay, I learned something. But going in on these last two, we covered, again, where David was organizing everything. He was getting everything going that he could. He is setting up all the stones. He's got the masons ready to go. He's got the carpenters. He's got the nails. He's got the gold. He's got the silver. He's got the brass. He has the area. He's got everything ready to just put this thing up. He's probably got it doesn't say that, but I'm pretty sure the linens are on their way and all these, whatever they're going to have in there getting ready. The gold is ready. All the structure, all the creation of the temple is ready. It's just that he's not putting it together yet. That's for Solomon to do. But he also sets up the Levites. He sets up the sons of Aaron. He sets up the porters. He sets up the musicians. He sets up the governors over the area who would go over and take care of the entire country and keep an eye on. And again, this is not like someone who's controlling my little world, but they're having a control on the economy to an extent. They're a little bit like our government in the sense that they're making sure that, like today we have land management to make sure that corporations are doing well with the land and that they're putting trees back in. We have the FDA that's looking over the quality of the agriculture. We have people that look over the quality of our meat packing plants. We have people that look over our banking system. There are people that look over, everything seems to have some sort of oversight for protection and for good governance and for good economy. And it was the responsibility of the king to make sure that all of this ran smoothly for the glory of God. So when we think of those men, and they were all over the place, they looked at the king's treasure, make sure that some of it might have been invested, some of them might have gone out for loans, some of it also was taking over, looking at the tillage of the ground. That would be like the FDA. Olive trees and sycamore trees, again, those are used for construction and lumber. So I'm not too far off the beam when I make this look like the agencies that we have to make sure of quality, to make sure of fair price within a certain limit, to make sure that people are not exploiting the land, not just raping the land for what they can get out of it, that they did have to, go for 6 years and let it wait for a seventh, and then maybe at another field went for 6 years, and then it had its seventh. All these things were the responsibility of the king. So we can't say it's just one guy looking over another, but the responsibility of the king. Just like, if you have a farm today, if you run a dairy, there are certain federal regulations you have to meet to be a good dairyman. So again, drawing that analogy. In 28, he assembles all the princes of the tribes together and all the captains of the hundreds and the stewards of his substance and all of these guys we've talked about in 27. He draws them together, and when you say he drew them together, many times when it says all Israel came, it was also talking about the representatives. If the princes of the area came, it was considered all Israel came because the princes were going to take the information back to their areas. Now, there are times when all Israel came. There's times with the reading of the word that all Israel came to hear. But many times, this was about all Israel was considered everybody, this representative of Judah, this representative of Simeon, this representative of Issachar showed up as a representative, then would take that. I met with the king, he says we're doing it this way. And then it's consistency. If you see someone in Simeon doing something different than you, wait a minute, I know which one of you, but if you see consistency at Simeon and Issachar and Zebulun, then you'll know, okay, we're all on the same page. But yeah, he calls them together. He calls all Israel together, including these representatives. And he starts talking to them, "Hear my brethren and my people." And he talks about how he set his heart to find a place of rest for the Ark of the Covenant. And again, he's looking at the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord for the footstool of our God, and has made ready for the building. He wasn't just talking about the building. His focus was the Ark of the Covenant. Remember in First Chronicles here, we began big with the world, then we went down to the area, then we went down to Israel, then we went down to Judah, then we went down to David, then we went down to not Ziklag, but over to Jerusalem. And then Jerusalem is the place where he's going to build this structure, but it's not about the structure. It's about the Ark of the Covenant. All of this whole thing we're talking about centers not just on Jerusalem, but it centers on God's place where his oracle will be. And that's the important part. It's not just, it's the holy city of 3 different religions. That's not the issue. The issue is the Ark of the Covenant. It's not even the building proper, the bread and the candlesticks and all the priest with their whole garb and the epoch and all these things and the cleanliness laws and the different types of sacrifices that you do. It's all about the presence of God and the Ark of the Covenant. That's the focal point of all of this. And he says that it's all about the Ark of the Covenant. And he even said that God said, I didn't ask for this, but if you want to do it, I'll go with you. I didn't tell you to. But hey, if it's in your heart to do this for me, I'll move in. And see, that's where, again, we have a New Testament things that if you open the door, I will come in and sup with him and him with me. The idea of I'll make my abode with you. That's the same thing that's happening here. We kind of like that, make that very pedestrian, like, okay, God's living with me, big deal, hand me the remote kind of thing. This almost sit by Jesus' side stuff. This was important. God was going to make his footstool. He was going to sit as a king on top of the Ark of the Covenant. Remember, the Ark of the Covenant was traced like a giant throne. It didn't have these angels looking over like, I think, Indiana Jones, Steven Spielberg made that just so it would kind of fit with the movie. It was a little bitty box. It didn't really have the same dimensions. You couldn't have lifted this thing like they did and carried it around. Big old cherubims in the back. It took several men. These staves may have been very long. It might have been 3 or 4 men on one stave, on one end, just to carry this thing. Gold is real heavy. And so he talks about it, and he says that he would do it, and that he had chosen Solomon, his son, to sit on the throne of the kingdom. And now he talks to Solomon, my son. He has built my house and my courts, and I have chosen him to be my son. Listen to those words. I have chosen him to be my son. He didn't have to make sonship with king, to treat him like a son. He could have treated him like a king or treated him like a special person. But I'm going to treat him like a son. And I will establish his kingdom forever if he be consistent to do my commandments and my judgments as at this day. See, there's the hook. If he'll do this the way I'm saying, then things will go well and everything will go fine. So it's up to Solomon. And therefore, there's this. Now, therefore, in the sight of Israel and the congregation of the Lord, in the audience of our Lord, seek and keep all the commandments. He talks about the commandments. But if thou forsake me, but if thou forsake him, he says this to Solomon, if you forsake him, he will cast you off forever. Now, he didn't cast him off forever, but Solomon also came back in repentance. But the idea, if you forsake him and keep, that he'll cast you off. He won't deal with you with this way. He'll deal with someone else. You'll get cast off. So it's a warning, and there should be fear. David was afraid to approach God after what happened, after what happened with him erroneously, even though he was provoked by the devil. He counted the people of Israel, knowing that God said they're going to be as the sand of the sea and the stars of the sky. Don't bother numbering them, but I'm going to number them anyway. God considers even that little slight to be a sin. We don't think about that. We think about, well, it's homosexuality, or it's abortion, or it's adultery, or murder. You know, he's saying that if I said don't count the sin, don't count the people, and you count them, obey me. And when you disobey him, that's considered sin. We kind of draw some lines crazy in the sand that seems to cover us. But when you do it from his point of view, we're all sinners. So he goes in talking to Solomon and talking about how he's provided all this stuff and the weight of the candlesticks and the tables and all these things. And everything is provided for Solomon. He says this to Solomon in front of the people, that they're ready to do the work. And he says, be strong and of good courage. Where have we heard that before? In Joshua, all over the place. And many times, be strong and of good courage. Be strong and of good courage. Be strong and courageous. Strong and courageous. Fear not and be dismayed. I love this part here. For the Lord, even my God, will be with thee. The idea that God is with you. Many of these other gods and other nations sit up high. You worship them. You know, shed blood. You do what you want to do. He's distinct. He's separate. He's way over, you know, up in the heavens somewhere. And if you do it wrong, he'll thump you. But otherwise, he's not with you. Here we say, God with thee. For us, that's Emmanuel, God with us. So he's going to be with him. And so in 29, David talks to him even more and talks about how God has chosen, even though you're young and tender and the work is great, but he's trying to, you know, take some of the edge off of doing this work. Now I've prepared with all my might for the house of the Lord and for the gold and for the things in silver. He's reminding them that what's been provided. And sometimes we look at the work of the Lord, and I'm talking fast, I need to slow down. We see the work of the Lord, and we forget that many of what we need has already been provided. We just need to step in and utilize what God has provided. If he hasn't given me something, then that's not something I need to do what he wants me to do. But if I look at his provisions, for that will tell me what I need to do sometimes. We all sit there, what is God's will for my life? Well, what provisions has been given to you? You know, if you have big, thick boots, and he's giving you a backpack and a big jacket, maybe you need to go into the woods. If he's giving you tools and a belt and a hammer and a chisel, maybe you need to go build something. If he's giving you books, maybe you need to go teach something. Look at what God has given you, not, you know, or there's this abstraction of, well, I'm going to be a doctor or a dentist or a chemist. Well, okay, but what's around you that you can utilize right now for the glory of God? So he talks about that. Because I set my affection on the house of God, again, there's free will there. I set my affection on the house of God. I'm not just talking about the local church, but the house of God. Sometimes we're into church worship now. We've forgotten that the purpose of the temple is the Ark of the Covenant. The purpose of the church is Christ. We get too busy worshiping the church and taking care of the church that we forget its purpose is the Ark of the Covenant, which is Christ. But here he talks about that I set my affection on the house of God and have my own proper goods. And he talks about all that he's prepared, all of the gold and the silver. And then the chief priests and the princes of the tribes and all of them, they offered willingly. So even the people, these people that were powerful, that he made, these 24 men who were over, you know, for 2 weeks a year, they would be over managing the governance, the proper governance of the land by the king. They gave of their stuff. This was not just a king giving, but this was people giving. You can imagine the amount of free will offering these people would give. And imagine some of the poor people say, yeah, but I can spare these 2 pieces of coins. I can spare this silver. I can spare this sheep. I can spare this linen. You know, it wouldn't have been just a king providing, but it would have been all Israel providing. So he talks about that. And the people rejoiced, for they offered willingly, because with perfect heart they offered willingly to the Lord. There's that willingly word. Again, not to throw too much shade at Calvinism, but you see free will and willing all over the place. God didn't hypnotize them. He didn't, you know, choose for them to do this. That you wouldn't have the word willingly. If I'm forcing somebody to do something, that's not willingly. But when someone willingly does something for me, or willingly goes and mows the yard, or willingly goes and cleans up, we want a willing heart to where they're doing things beyond. So we see willing here, and David blessed the Lord before all the congregation, and he has this little soliloquy where he goes in and uses again his his ideas of, again, like a psalmist, how great you are, and your power and your majesty, for all that is heaven and the earth is thine. Thine is the kingdom, O Lord. Riches and honor come to thee, and thou reignest over all, and in thy hand is power and might. And he's just worshiping, just pure worship here at the very end. And he goes, who am I, and what is my people, that thou should be able to offer so willingly after this sort of all the things come to thee, and of thine own that we have given. What he's saying is, the stuff we gave you, it was yours to begin with. We're only giving you stuff that you gave us. I own nothing. God gave me everything, and I'm giving back to him. So he talks about they were strangers, and he worships the Lord some more. And thou also, my Lord, thou triest the heart, and hast pleasure in uprightness. This is something we can remember. And he goes back even to, O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he goes back even to the Abrahamic promise to see that God has moved so far and has done so much, and is now moving forward, and now actually wanting to put his feet in a place and that will be stable and will be on this planet. That's amazing thought. If we really think about it, we're so pedestrian. Well, God's everywhere. Yeah, but his presence, his counsel, he will be there for anyone to come and see if they'll come rightly through the proper gates. And he gives Solomon unto Solomon a perfect heart to keep your commandments and your statutes. Again, very important, commandments and statutes. And David spoke to the congregation, now bless the Lord your God. Again, we're stopping to say the Lord your God, not the Lord my God, or but the Lord thy God and Lord your God. This is your God. We forget that sometimes. We get lost in our worship and forget that we're dealing with a personal God. He talks about sacrifices and offerings going on day and night. And they sacrificed 1,000 bullocks and 1,000 rams. They just went to town offering. And again, these meat offerings would have gone back to the people, many of them. Some of them going to the Levites and stuff, and some of them going to Aaron and his sons. But there was just a feast going on, not a sinful feast, but a good quality of worship feast. We think about that. We think about, the marriage supper of the Lamb. We think about those kind of things. Here we have this wonderful feast going on, and they did eat and drink before the Lord for the day of gladness, and made Solomon his king the second time. Again, this is an analogy to Christ, how he will be king the second time. He was king the first time on the cross, and he will be king the second time when he sits in Jerusalem. And he is anointed, and the second time, the king of David, he was anointed him. Zadok the priest anointed him to be king. And all the princes and the mighty men likewise submitted themselves. All of these mighty men with all their stuff submitted themselves. Submission is very important, even if you're mighty, to submit to this authority over you, that someone can tell you what to do and you'll say, yes, sir. That's what submission is. Submission is looking someone and saying, yes, sir. Contentiousness is, I'm not sure. Now, you do want to have a little bit of counsel. Well, what if we did it this way? Or what if we approach it this way? Or can I do it tomorrow? Or can I do it this afternoon? They might say, I don't care when it gets done, as long as it gets done. Or we need it done by X amount, or X time, and by X amount, about prices. Submission, contentiousness is, I don't want to do it that way, or I think you're doing it the wrong way. I don't trust you. Submission is, I trust you, I'll do it. Well, let's discuss a little bit of wiggle room here. God wants us to have a personal relationship where we do take our talents and we can discuss things with him. But many times when he says do something, it's yes, sir, I'm on it. So they submitted themselves, and the Lord magnified Solomon and lifted him up and bestowed on him royal majesty as had not been on any king before him. And thus David, the son of Jesse, reigned over all Israel. He reigned there 40 years, 7 years in Hebron, and 33 years in Jerusalem, and he died of a good old age. And Solomon reigned in his stead. And it talks about this is the end of the reign of David. We're starting with 2 Chronicles tomorrow. We're turning another page. But I'm thinking, at least through 1 Chronicles, the focus has been Jerusalem, and the focus is the Ark of the Covenant. Let's see what we have in 2 Chronicles and see what it has to say. Maybe it has to do where they turn against the Ark of the Covenant and the temple, and that becomes a bad thing. So we're going to keep going on the history, But there's a wonderful thing going on, and we can learn a lot here about God is with us, and we need to submit to Him and say, yes, sir.